50 miles to the north, a Catholic mission is the last outpost of civilization. 5 missionaries have been killed in these last few years before the sound of the bell awakened faith in these valleys. Here, after hundreds of dark centuries, men discover for the first time in their lives that they have a doubt, a question to which they cannot find an answer. A vague and unknown anguish which is not hunger, nor thirst, nor physical pain, but aches like a wound just the same. It is the anguish which accompanies man from the beginning to the end of the world. But they still don't know it. They discovered the world and themselves only yesterday. And today, already, they need a faith which will give them the hope of becoming better people in a better world.
Native society is not simply described as a society lacking in values. The native is declared insensible to ethics. He represents not only the absence of values, but also the negation of values. All values, in fact, are irrevocably poisoned and diseased as soon as they are allowed in contact with the colonized race. The customs of the colonized people, their traditions, their myths, above all, their myths, are the very sign of that poverty of spirit. As soon as the native begins to cause anxiety to the settler, he is handed over to well-meaning souls who point out to him the wealth of Western values. I speak of the Christian religion, and no one need be astonished. The church in the colonies is the white people's church, the foreigner's church. She does not call the native to God's ways, but to the ways of the white man, of the master, of the oppressor. And as we know, in this matter, many are called, but few chosen.
Hur länge har ni varit här?
Här i Tanzania,
ja.
Sen 52 i december månad. Så
vad som skulle vara intressant att höra är vad har förändrats här framför allt, i första hand?
Ja, det största förändringarna, och det är väl att det blev ett fristat. Ja. Det är väl faktiskt en av de största.
Har människorna förändrats på något sätt? Invändigt så att säga?
Ja, de är väl rätt så lika tror jag.
Har ni själv förändrats?
Ja, det har man säkert efter så många år.
I vilken riktning?
Ja. Man ser väl kanske lite annorlunda på läget också nu än strax när man kom ut, ska jag tänka mig. Så man kanske ser lite mer realistiskt på det också.
Mm. Har ni försökt att ändra på människor? Det har väl varit en del av er uppgift?
Ja, det är klart. Det har vi väl försökt, för att vi är ju ute i missionens tjänst, och på så sätt har vi försökt att förändra.
I första hand då i religiösa frågor naturligtvis.
Ja,
vad fanns det för religion här innan ni kom hit? Är det någon som ni inte tycker att det kan godkännas så att säga?
Det fanns...
Den afrikanska religionen menar jag.
Den afrikanska religionen, det har väl... Ska man säga? Den har väl alltid funnits och den fortsätter väl finnas, det är klart. Men missionen i stort sett, den har ju fått ett väldigt bra grepp över folksjälen, tror jag.
Ja.
Ja.
Men det måste ju ha inneburit stora förändringar på många håll. Till exempel, vad ska jag säga, familjeorganisationer med polygami och sånt.
Ja. Du kanske.
Ja.
Ja, vi som mission, vi förbjuder ju att församlingsmedlemmar ska ha mer än en hustru till exempel. Det är ju otänkbart för en som tillhör en pingstförsamling här ute att kunna gifta sig en andra eller tredje gång. Utan då får han nöja sig med sin första fru.
Är det egentligen en kristen synpunkt eller är det en europeisk synpunkt? Finns det något stöd i Bibeln för monogami?
Det gör det väl.
Är det det?
Åtminstone i det nya testamentet så.
Finns det
Tror
någonstans där att man bara får ha en hustru?
Till exempel,
Jag är så
det står att en församlingsföreståndare ska vara en mans hustru. En hustrus man.
Asså? Ja. Och nu bygger ni en kyrka här i Morsi.
Ja, det har vi.
Ja, jag ser. Är
Just
det som
det.
kommer först, så att säga, kyrkan, evangeliseringen?
Ja, det brukar vi försöka att göra.
Kommer ni att också bygga skolor och sjukhus och sånt här? Eller?
Det vet vi inte just nu.
Nej,
Det
första
får,
är
bli,
kyrkan.
det får bli i andra hand i så fall.
Ja.
Men först en kyrka.
Ja.
För att det känner vi väldigt stort behov av att få.
In the colonial context, the settler ends his work of breaking in the native when the latter admits loudly and intelligibly the supremacy of white man's values. For a colonized people, the most essential value, because the most concrete, is first and foremost the land which will bring them bread and, above all, dignity. But this dignity has nothing to do with the dignity of the human individual. For that human individual has never heard tell of it. All that the native has seen in his country is that they can freely arrest him, beat him, starve him, and no professor of ethics, no priest, has ever come to be beaten in his place, nor to share his bread with him. The well-known principle that all men are equal will be illustrated in the colonies from the moment that the native claims that he is the equal of the settler. The native intellectual had learned from his masters that the individual ought to express himself fully. The colonialist bourgeoisie had hammered into the native's mind the essential qualities of the West, the idea of a society of individuals, where each person shuts himself up in his own subjectivity, a society whose only asset is individual thought. capitalism in its early days saw in the colonies a source of raw materials, which once turned into manufactured goods, could be distributed on the European market. After a phase of accumulation of capital, capitalism has today come to modify its conception of the profit-earning capacity of a commercial enterprise. A blind domination founded on slavery is not, economically speaking, worthwhile. The colonies have become a market. Today, the colonized country's national struggle crops up in a completely new international situation. What the factory owners and finance magnates of the mother country expect from their government is not that it should decimate the colonial peoples, but that it should safeguard their own legitimate interests. The private companies put pressure on their own governments, at least to set up military bases for the purpose of assuring protection of their interests. Thus, there exists a sort of detached complicity between capitalism and the violent forces which blaze up in a colonial territory. For centuries, the capitalists have behaved in the underdeveloped world like nothing more than war criminals. Deportations, massacres, forced labor, and slavery have been the main methods used by capitalism to increase its wealth, its gold or diamond reserves, and to establish its power. Not long ago, Nazism transformed the whole of Europe into a veritable colony. The governments of European nations called for reparations and demanded the wealth which had been stolen from them. Cultural treasures, pictures, sculptures, and stained glass have been given back to their owners. The wealth of the imperial countries is our wealth too. Europe has stuffed herself excessively with the gold and raw materials of the colonial countries, Latin America, China, and Africa. From all these continents, under whose eyes Europe today raises up her tower of wealth, there has flowed out for centuries towards that same Europe diamonds and oil, silk and cotton, wood and exotic products. Europe is literally the creation of the third world. The wealth which smothers her is that which was stolen from the underdeveloped peoples. The well-being and the progress of Europe have been built up with the sweat and the dead bodies of Negroes, Arabs, Indians, and the Asian races. We have decided not to overlook this any longer. They will not manage to divide the progressive forces which mean to lead mankind toward happiness by brandishing the threat of a third world which is rising like the tide to swallow up all Europe. The third world does not mean to organize a great crusade of hunger against the whole of Europe. What it expects from those who for centuries have kept it in slavery is that they will help it to rehabilitate mankind and make humanity victorious everywhere, once and for all. Specialized in the Negro slave trade and owe their renown to millions of deported slaves. So when we hear the head of a European state declare with his hand on his heart that he must come to the aid of the poor, underdeveloped peoples, we do not tremble with gratitude. Quite the contrary. We say to ourselves, it's a just reparation which will be paid to us. This help should be the ratification of a double realization. The realization by the colonized peoples that it is their due, and the realization by the capitalist powers that in fact they must pay. But it is clear that we are not so naive as to think that this will come about with the cooperation and the goodwill of the European governments. This huge task, which consists of reintroducing mankind into the world, the whole of mankind, will be carried out with the indispensable help of the European peoples, who themselves must realize that in the past, they have often joined the ranks of our common masters. To achieve this, the European peoples must first decide to wake up and shake themselves, use their brains, and stop playing the stupid game of the sleeping beauty. When you examine at close quarters the colonial context, it is evident that what defines one's place in the world is the fact of belonging to or not belonging to a given race, a given species. In the colonies, the economic substructure is also a superstructure. The cause is the consequence. You are rich because you are white. You are white because you are rich. Colonialism is not a thinking machine, nor a body endowed with reasoning faculties. It is violence in its natural state, and it will only yield when confronted with greater violence. The colonized man will first manifest this aggressiveness, which has been deposited in his bones, against his own people. This is the period when the niggers beat each other up, and the police and magistrates do not know which way to turn when faced with the astonishing waves of crime. All these patterns of conduct are those of the death reflex when faced with danger, a suicidal behavior which proves to the settler that these men are not reasonable human beings. The oppressor starts the process of domination, of exploitation, and of robbery. In the other sphere, the coiled, plundered creature, which is the native, provides fuel for the process as best he can. The process moves uninterruptedly from the banks of the colonial territory to the palaces and the docks of the mother country. In this becalmed zone, the sea has a smooth surface. The palm tree stirs gently in the breeze. The waves lap against the pebbles, and raw materials are ceaselessly transported, justifying the presence of the settler.
There's no way or place for me to go. This is my home. And this is where I intend to die.
The settler makes history. His life is an epic, an odyssey. He is the absolute beginning. This land was created by us. He is the unceasing cause. If we leave, all is lost, and the country will go back to the Middle Ages. And all the while, the native, bent double, more dead than alive, exists interminably in an unchanging dream. The native is boxed into a corner. Apartheid is simply one form of the division into compartments of the colonial world. The first thing which the native learns is to stay in his place and to not go beyond certain limits. This is why the dreams of the native are always of muscular prowess. His dreams are of action and of aggression. I dream I am jumping, swimming, running, climbing. I dream that I burst out laughing, that I span a river in one stride, or that I'm followed by a flood of motor cars which never catch up with me. During the period of colonization, the native never stops achieving his freedom, from 9 in the evening until 6 in the morning. Colonized man is an envious man, for there is no native who does not dream at least once a day of setting himself up in the settler's place. Humanity is waiting for something other from us. A new human being.